Welcome to LivingFuelTV. I'm KC Craichy with special guest John Peterson. Welcome, John.
Brother, great to be here.
Glad to have you. We've been going over some fascinating stuff with you, John,
it's been good,
about the
yeah.
history of exercise and how to use body weight exercise and all that sort of thing. And it's important to our viewers because a lot of them are coming to us and saying, you know, what can we do to be in the shape we need to be in, you know, come summer, which is just a few weeks away now. And so I'm bringing in people that are just doing it different in a really leading edge and powerful, logical way. And you're one of those guys. I say you're the
Thank you.
You're the natural body weight health guy. You know, you really, you know, obviously I wrote about it in my book and
by the way, Living Fuel is a big part of what I teach.
Well,
it truly is. You've got the best natural food on this planet to help people reduce excess body fat, okay, build really strong lead muscle. It's really the superfood, Casey.
Well,
I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We love it, and we'll get into some more nutrition stuff in a little bit. Right now, let's get into what you do from a body weight isometric. Let's talk to us about
isometrics. Okay.
It's kind of a lost
art, isn't it? Okay. Now right after World War II, you can imagine Germany especially had thousands upon thousands, tens of thousands of soldiers returning that needed to be rehabbed because of injury or what have you. But with limited beds, you know, back in those days, in the late 1940s, they really didn't have enough equipment, you know, regular equipment for standard rehab. So then the scientists at the Max Planck Institute in Dortmund, Germany, they researched something. Now, there had been a strong man on the European continent by the name of Alexander Zos, famous for breaking chains, bending horseshoes, bending bars. Now get this, he developed his isometric technique as a prisoner of war in World War I. Story goes that he actually got so strong he bent the bars, made a grappling hook, lowered himself off the window, off a wall, and escaped. True story.
Wow.
He later developed his own exercise system using chains and things that he sold. It was purely isometric. Okay? So, I'm thinking that what happened was right after the war, when they needed to rehab, they probably wondered, the scientists at Max Planck, is it true? Can you really rehab muscle, build muscle, regain strength through the use of isometric contraction, which is actually putting a muscle into fixed positions, okay, contracting at 2/3 of your maximum strength, and they discovered that if a 2/3 contraction were held at any given point for 6 to 10 seconds, that muscle would be stimulated to grow and strengthen as much as it can be. And it was utilized with phenomenal success from the late 1940s all the way through the mid-1960s. It was a part of sport, even here in America.
You know, it's funny because I go back to football practice in high school. I remember, you know, that one of the drills you have to do is you have to get on all fours and someone stand beside you. You put your head up beside their leg and you press as hard as you can for 10 seconds, the count of 10, and then you do the other side because you have to have a strong neck in football. I also remember when I first got started in martial arts years ago that this muscle here had to be tight, and I remember somebody teaching me an isometric activity on this, and it's rock hard to this day. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if there's any better way to build the size of a muscle, not to mention the strength of the muscle, than isometrics. Now, the big knock on isometrics has been, I think mostly from people who are not really schooled in isometrics, is that isometrics limits flexibility. So, speak to that.
Okay, isometrics limit flexibility only if that's all you do. Charles Atlas integrated dynamic strength exercises that integrated full movement as well as the isometric component. Excuse me. Now, even today though, for rehab, I have a friend that had to have shoulder surgery, and the doctors wanted him to perform a series of isometric contractions. But what you have to do is you need to do the contractions at multiple points throughout a range of motion. In other words, like let's say for your biceps here, Casey, put one fist over the other. Okay, now we start here, we do our first contraction there. Then we change the angle here. That's for a second contraction. Finally, the third one up here. Okay. What you want to do is hit multiple points within any given range of motion. Then you don't have the problems with flexibility that have normally been associated with just
Plus
one
the
position.
dynamic tension or isoflexion when you freeze a muscle and then you move it while it's tight as you can and you move it again. That gives you a complete range of motion and actually gives you a stretch at the same time.
Well, Sensei over here, he's been using these dynamic tension exercises for years and years. It was part of his martial arts training. Senshin Kata, for instance. Iron wire. This has been utilized in the martial arts for centuries and centuries as natural strength building techniques. And
Bruce Lee was one of these guys.
Oh boy, was he ever. Isometrics were a huge component of what Bruce Lee actually did.
But one of the problems with isometrics, I find, when people, they don't breathe when they're doing isometrics.
And you have to breathe.
You have to breathe.
Yes. Okay. Actually, what you do is while you're building your contraction, you breathe in. And then when you hit your peak contraction, that's when you start a controlled exhale. And it sounds like air being let out of a tire. I mean, literally like a just like that. That will control fluctuations in blood pressure. But now you're mentioning blood pressure. And do you know that there was a doctor in New York City in the 1960s that had phenomenal success in lowering blood pressure through isometric contraction?
I'm not surprised in the least. The think into the muscle, explain that, because you know that is so critical.
That was part of Alois P. Swoboda's training method way back 100 years ago. And it's interesting because in Education of a Bodybuilder, Arnold Schwarzenegger himself mentioned that he noticed that if he wasn't thinking into what he was doing, that he wasn't getting the results he wanted. So he had to focus on exactly what he was doing. It wasn't the weight, it was the focus and the intensity, thinking into the muscles.
The muscle, the main one driving like a curl, you would think into the bicep.
You'd be thinking into your biceps, yes.
This thing about thinking into it to the point where you can actually cause a contraction. Now this is something I thought I understood from you. You can correct me on this, and it has worked for me, as crazy as it might seem. Is, you know, after I work out my hamstrings, for instance, I'll contract them until they cramp.
Oh boy.
And then I'll leave them cramped until the cramp goes away. And I find I have way less cramping in my hamstrings.
Yes. Well, you know, the interesting thing about that is as you practice that, you get to the point where it takes more and more to actually make that cramp happen.
It's almost can't get it to cramp now.
Right. That's because your muscles have become so strong, and the neural units too, the nerve units to the muscles, everything has been really enhanced to the maximum, so you can contract any muscle whenever you want, and it won't necessarily cramp anything.
So what you find in the gym is when you get to the point where you've got a cramp, you'll fight it off right away and rub it out.
Right.
You see, and I think, tell me if I'm wrong, I think it's better to relax through the cramp until you're able. I'm not talking about a cramp at the third quarter of a football game. I'm talking about, you know,
I
thinking
agree
into the
with
muscle.
you. Thinking into the muscle, you feel that cramp. In fact, there's a very simple exercise that everybody out there watching us can do right now. All they need to do is extend their arm straight out in front of them, okay? Turn the palm up. Now, bring your hand and touch your little finger to your earlobe, and then try to twist your thumb up and see what happens. No, you want to keep your arm up, okay? And you'll feel a contraction in your bicep.
Yeah.
That is just, it really cramps, right?
Well, I want to finish this segment by saying there's been research to show that you can think through a muscular activity and not actually do any muscular activity.
I've read the research.
And you could actually show significant growth in muscle. So my point here is that, you know, when you learn, this is a learning process. I've been doing this now for 5 years, you know, and I'm only now really getting that, oh, well, I can make that muscle do this, or I can make this muscle do that. But just think about the people who like have a cast on their leg. You know, you can think into that muscle and get benefit instead of atrophy.
Absolutely.
You know, and you can also do isometrics in some of those cases too when the pain is not there. You know?
Right.
So anyway, just some fuel for thought. The fuel for thought.
All right,
thanks, John.
Well,
we sure hope you enjoyed it, and we wish you super health.
Super health.